Hey everybody, Mark Campbell here, and today we're going to start out one of our first videos on some different tech that we're going to be covering. Today's video is going to be on cam cores, so basically what we start out with when we're making a camshaft. We're going to talk about the different materials, the different types of camshafts, and a few different tech items related to that. So hope you enjoy what we have to talk about. Alright, so the first camshaft that we're going to talk about is a flat tappet, either a hydraulic or flat tappet solid lifter style camshaft. Typically these camshafts are a cast material. There is the odd situation where we actually do some tool steel stuff in the flat tappet as well, but that's a whole nother video to talk about. But as you can see, this camshaft right here, it's an unground lobe camshaft, or a UGL. We also refer to them as cores. We use lots of different verbiage and whatnot to classify them, but you can see it's still very, very rough. But this camshaft is basically finished on the journals. It does have a gear that's hobbed on, or as you'll see on some of the later ones, pressed on sometimes as well too. The lobes are done to a certain range of lift and duration. But the camshaft is basically an unfinished piece at this point. Like I said, it is made out of cast material. All of these camshafts are typically your -2 through -5 camshafts. And they all use a conventional cast iron or cast style gear on the back of the camshaft that drives the distributor. And on these particular camshafts, you can pretty much use any distributor gear that comes on your stock distributor, or if you have an aftermarket distributor, those gears are fully compatible with pretty much anything that you have. So the next camshaft that we have here is a core that we typically use on a hydraulic roller or mild solid roller street style camshaft. This particular core is made out of tempered iron, not the same type of iron, of course, as you have or cast as a conventional flat tappet. But the beauty of this style of core is that it does have a gear that is compatible with conventional style gears. Now, usually we do recommend an upgrade to a melanized style gear on a camshaft like this, but it's not absolutely necessary. So that is the beauty of this particular core. Once again, it's a roughed out lobe. The journals are finished or very, very close to finished size. So all we need to do, we have multiple different versions of, well, hundreds literally of these different cores. And once we know exactly what camshaft we're grinding, whether it's a part number or a custom camshaft, we'll pick the proper core that has the right lobe, and we'll grind the camshaft. These style of camshafts still do have a fuel pump boss, just like the cast flat tappets do, because as we know, some of these engines will go into retrofit engines that aren't fuel injected. So that's an tempered iron core, and those are typically all of our -8 series cores. The next core that we have on the table here is a 8620 billet core. Now, when people talk about billet cores, sometimes that does get a little bit confusing. A billet core can be made out of a whole array of different materials. I'll cover a few of them here right now. The basic ones start out as 5150 or 5160 material, also 8620, 8660, 9310 is very popular, especially in a lot of the top fuel engines, and also tool steel is another very popular version. With the tool steel, there's even multiple versions of that. We have at Comp an ST4 tool steel, which is a much more, a little bit more pliable version of ST4, or of tool steel, sorry. But there are multiple different versions of that. This particular one that you are looking at is an 8620, but this is unique because it actually has a cast gear on it. Now, most 8620 or most billet camshafts, of course, the camshaft is all made out of the same material, and the gear that'll be on it is also made out of steel and is not compatible with a cast iron style distributor gear. But we do actually, in fact, make some cores that have the whole rear section of this camshaft is actually pressed on with a dowel pin to keep it in place. So the gear is actually, in fact, made out of cast instead of steel. So you can use this camshaft on the street if you want. Once again, journals are pretty much to size. Lobes are roughed into a certain size. And as I mentioned, multiple different types of materials. These are all typically our -9 or up camshafts. Also a lot of different versions of this with alternate firing orders and all kinds of different journal sizes. This style of camshaft here gets really, really in depth as far as how many cores we have. So the last camshaft that we have on the table here is a tool steel camshaft. This camshaft, of course, is typically reserved for all-out racing, can be used in all kinds of different applications. This camshaft, of course, gets to be a lot more of an expensive piece. You can also see on the lobes that there's a lot more lobe mass here that we can grind off. The reason for that, and we'll get into this just a little bit later as well, but the heat treat on a tool steel camshaft is completely different than anything else, and the depth of hardness on this material is very, very, very deep. So we can actually cut a tremendous amount off that lobe without having to worry about getting through the heat treat or anything like that. This camshaft here is for a big block Chevrolet. The gear is made out of tool steel, just like the rest of the camshaft is, so therefore you do need to run an upgraded gear on this distributor. Most of the tool steel camshafts, we actually leave the journals a bunch larger than size, or final size, because there are so many different variations, and because we can cut so much off of this lobe that it's a lot more versatile than a lot of these other camshafts. This still does have the ability to have a fuel pump lobe on it. They typically don't get used very much, but it is possible. Most of these camshafts are 50, 55, 60, 65 millimeter, and even bigger. We do some 70 plus millimeter stuff camshafts as well, and typically those are all in tool steel. These camshafts, they typically a -17, or there's multiple different series of tool steel, but this is definitely one of our most high-end camshafts that we make. All right, so now we've talked about all the 4 different camshaft cores that we have up here. We'll just get into a little bit more conversation on each one of these and how we go about determining what we need. As we talked about a little bit in the video, all of these camshafts have a heat treat on them. And that's something that's very, very important when remembering or when we're selecting what core we use. The heat treat depth on each individual material varies quite a bit. So like an 8620 versus a 5160. The 5160 you can actually cut a bunch more material off of than you can an 8620. As I mentioned before, with the ST4 or any tool steel material, you can cut off a tremendous amount off of that. So big difference between what core you're selecting, and that's why if you come to Comp Cams, we'll probably show you some videos later of this too, but we have literally thousands of different cores that are on the shelf. And that's why it's very important, because one size doesn't fit all. This camshaft core might work for a camshaft that's 220 on the intake, 230 on the exhaust, 500 lift. But if you wanted to do a camshaft that was like 240, 250, 600 lift, you need a different core, because the heat treat depth only allows you to go so far. Plus, if you're trying to physically add lobe lift to this camshaft and cutting off the base circle of the camshaft to add more to the top side, of course you start cutting into that too much, you have problems. So we really have a wide variety of different camshaft cores as well, because of the different gear material and what people are trying to run, whether it's street or race. There's a lot of different choices. So please make any comments if you want. If you got some questions, we'll try and answer them. But hopefully that gives you a little bit better understanding of what we go through and why we have so many different cores, a little bit about the different materials that they're made out of, and kind of what goes into making all the different camshafts that we make. So thank you very much, and we'll be making more of these, so please tune in and watch.